I'm Jasmine Moradi, and you're listening to the Queens of Tech podcast, a podcast series about workplace role models, where I get the opportunity to ask 60 plus questions to female influencers about their journey into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. My vision with this podcast is to raise the workplace ecosystem for women in tech. My mission is to bridge the gap between schools and workplaces by highlighting female role models in STEM to encourage more young girls and women to unleash their full potential in these fields to reach top leadership roles. In this episode, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, tech queen Melanie Yencken, UX director at Google. Hi, Melanie.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Well, I'm very happy to have you joining us from California, US today. How are you?
I'm doing so well, thank you.
Happy to hear. Now, let us dive into your journey into STEM. Hope you're ready for the Queens of Tech 60 plus questions.
I am ready.
Let's warm up with a few fun facts about you. How would you describe your personality in 3 hashtags?
Getting it done, before and after, and fun.
How would you describe your life in 3 sentences?
A journey of resilience, a journey of finding happiness, and so many adventures, which I'm only partway through.
What kind of music stimulates and motivates you the most?
Oh, the throwbacks. So music from days at festivals growing up, like Temper Trap, or house music from my clubbing days, or just the classic Daft Punk Discovery live recording.
What's your personal motto?
I don't have a motto, but I have 3 values: lift up others, realize my visions, and live with balance.
What is your favorite book?
Gone with the Wind, just an absolute classic, my first period drama romance that I ever read.
What is your favorite podcast?
Oh, okay, I'm devouring Financial Feminist right now. Just realized how financially illiterate I am and how much more I need to improve, and it is so amazing.
Mac or PC?
I'm in designer, so Mac.
Say something interesting about you that most people don't know.
Okay, so I got to the final round and I almost made it onto the Great British Bake Off.
What is your hidden talent?
Well, linked to that, I make very elaborate gingerbread. I wouldn't call it baking, I would call it more like architecture.
If you were going to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Resilience.
Great start. Now, let us dig deeper. Our childhood has an effect on our adulthood. Our early experiences shape our belief about ourselves, others, and the world. Now, Melanie, I want to discover your childhood. Where did you grow up?
I am a child of the world. Born in Melbourne, split my time between Melbourne and London until I was about 13, because my dad lived in London and my mum lived in Melbourne. So school in Melbourne, every break in London. And then my dad moved to California. So then I was going back and forth between Melbourne and California. So kind of grew up on planes and in airports.
What was your dream job as a child?
To be a veterinarian.
What was your favorite subject in school?
I loved art and science, and that's why veterinarian originally.
What was your least favorite subject?
Oh my gosh, languages. I just could not retain the vocabulary. I was so bad.
What is your earliest memory of technology and the arrival of the internet?
I have 2 older brothers, and I remember my oldest brother, James, getting his first computer, and then that was shortly followed by my own, because I couldn't live without having my own of that. And yeah, my brother actually led a lot of my technology discovery as a child.
So which were the 3 first technology gadgets you owned?
Desktop computer, Nintendo, I think it was the original Nintendo that we had, and then my own personal one was a Game Boy.
Who was your female role model growing up and why?
Yeah, well, I had a few. I had my mum, and she ran her own business, which I think was pretty exceptional. She ran her own medical practice. And then I had such amazing female teachers at my high school. And then my friends. I spent so much time with my friends in my growing up in my early years.
How do you think where you grew up and the school you went to and the generation you come from influence your education and career choice?
Oh my gosh, so much. So yes, as I said, my mother ran her own business. That was amazing role modeling for me. My school was so inclusive in terms of diversity and gender diversity as well. And I also had older brothers. So growing up, like gender never really held me back. I feel like I didn't get some of the societal conditioning that other women did growing up. And I kind of realized that when I started in the career. And then also I was extremely privileged to get a great education. I had super inspiring teachers who really supported me and would go above and beyond. I think that was like a privilege that obviously not everyone gets. And then also I had access to technology all through my childhood, and that became an integral part of my life. And I think when I decided to focus on design, I naturally oriented towards digital design because I was kind of a digital native, even though, I'm a millennial. I've had it from as early as I can remember and had the very first thing, we shipped the iPhone over from the US when it came out to Australia and jailbroke it so that we could use it because I just had to try literally everything. So I think that definitely influenced where I ended up in my career.
That's amazing. Now I'm going to read 2 quotes. First one, how does the universe expect me to choose a career path at 16? I can't even choose what I want for dinner. Second, Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. So Melanie, I want to know the choices behind your career path. What did you study at university?
So I studied visual communication at Monash University. I loved art. I did fine art at school, but I wanted to make money. So I ended up doing graphic design.
And who and what influenced you to get into your chosen field?
So I was actually going to study veterinary science, did work experience placement and realized I loved animals too much to do that. I actually passed out in one of the surgery rooms and a cat was being operated on. And then I changed all my subjects to art, and my brother was studying visual communication at Monash University. So I literally followed him. He was in his 3rd year, I was in my 1st year. So I had a great role model there.
What professional roles have you had before that led you to the current one?
I really believe that every part of my journey has led to where I am now. So I think every single job I have had has contributed to the experience I needed to be in the role that I have. But I think the important ones were where I started to have aspects of leadership in my role. And actually my first job in Australia, where I went from a graduate to a senior designer, I had my first taste at leadership with the intern program. And I think that was pretty critical to me because I realized leading designers is actually the piece that I love the most. I mean, I did love being an IC designer, but the leadership part was really influential for me.
Everybody knows Google, but if you would explain it, what does Google do and what is your title?
So I'm UX director within Google Search, and I think everyone knows what Google Search is, but I'm specifically focusing on part of Google Search where we're trying to focus on modern creators.
How did you get the job and what are your main responsibilities?
Oh my gosh. So Google was just a place I always wanted to work at. And when I first moved to London, which was 13 years ago, I lived there. I think I applied to 5 different jobs immediately. I didn't even get a call back. Actually, maybe I had 1 call. I didn't make any progress. And then I just kind of gave up on that. And I eventually, after building up enough experience and my personal profile, I was then approached by a Google recruiter. Yeah, so then that was 3.5 years ago. And I've been at Google since then. So I lead a UX team, so user experience, which is made up of designers and different user experience specialties like visual design, copywriting, UX engineering, and we also have research for about 25 UXers in total. And my role is to kind of define the strategy, make sure that we have the right people doing the right things. I manage managers who are then managing the team and basically partner with our VP of product and our director of engineering and make sure that our whole team is, working on the right things.
What does a typical workday look like for you?
So I think being in senior leadership, it's meetings all day. I do my job in meetings. And what I do in those meetings, I review work, I give feedback on how the team are progressing, I meet with my team, I do lots of one-to-ones, I'm meeting my stakeholders, presenting our work and our status updates to our SVP. I am meeting with my peer lead.
I love the quote, choose a job you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. So Melanie, what do you love about your role?
So I said earlier, one of my values was lifting others up. So I love working on a product which touches so many people and can have like such a positive impact on them. And I love that like Google search as a product has so much reach, but there's so much opportunity to make it better in the future. So yeah, it's a massive problem, super exciting problem space to work on, and yeah, challenging but exciting.
What is the best experience you've had in your role so far?
Honestly, it's the people, like the people I get to work with in my team or my peers or my leads. Like everyone is so talented and so inspiring and just genuinely nice. Like it's just so amazing to be in an environment where, you know, everyone is so humble, but then you chat to them and they're like, oh yeah, I launched Gmail as a 20% project in my spare time, and you're just like, oh my gosh, you are so inspiring. So yeah, definitely the people.
And what would you say is the biggest challenge you've encountered so far?
It's kind of the reverse of what I just said. So when I started, especially joining as a leader, just like massive imposter syndrome. You know, how am I going to live up to these expectations? How can I be good when these, you know, there's like giants around me who are just, you know, amazing at what they do. So I found that quite hard to overcome. And then also it was just quite hard to adjust to the pace of everything in terms of how Google operates, because it's fairly bottoms up. So there's just so many things that you can be doing. And so when you get there, it's a bit overwhelming and you're trying to figure out what you should prioritize and what you should actually work on, because no one's going to tell you that. You have to figure that out yourself. Yeah, it was quite a learning curve in the beginning.
And how did you manage to tackle it?
I have had a lot of coaching actually through this process to help me focus on just being better at articulating what my own values are and what are the things that I want to work on, and then being very good at prioritization. So basically, you know, everything is urgent to someone else, right? And so I have to figure out what's urgent, but what's also important. And then how do I detach when I'm not at work so that I can actually rest and recuperate and, you know, be, you know, a healthy, functional human being, so that when I am at work, you know, I can operate well.
What do you wish everybody understood about your role?
Oh my gosh, no one knows what UX is. Like, this is so hard. My mum's like, I don't know what you do. Do you just put the buttons around on the page? And I'm like, I mean, I guess that is a little bit of what we do. But I wish people, you know, because every single person who uses a piece of technology experiences user experience. It's basically all of the logic defining how you interact with, you know, any piece of technology, and how that interaction makes you feel. And does it help you? Does it help you solve a problem? Does it help you do that in the best possible way? Does it bring you delight? What are the emotions you experience? There's just so many aspects to it, and I don't think people understand, you know, what goes into that. I love it.
What is the one common myth about your profession or field that you want to disapprove?
I guess maybe it's what I was just saying before about people just assume we're just putting buttons on a screen and that's all we're doing. But there's so much that goes into it in terms of all the different functions that are required, the research that we do to kind of validate, you know, what we're showing to people. And I think especially at Google, the considerations that we have around the impact of the things that we do and making sure that we are not negatively impacting society or people's lives, or that we are, you know, respecting privacy, and the users who use our product actually put a lot of trust into us. So like, it's just so deep, you know, the way that we have to go. And I think people maybe have a little bit of a shallow understanding of it. You know, it's just the visual elements at the top, but that's just literally the tip of the iceberg.
What do you love about working in the tech industry?
I love the pace, like the ability to innovate and solve people's problems at scale. I mean, that's what tech enables us. The other thing is it just helps us to work, you know, and solve things for people who are in just like the most remote situations. Tech almost democratizes access to information, which, you know, I just absolutely love. Like, I love serving the underdog, or people who, you know, have been negatively affected by the systems, or where they've grown up, or, you know, those kinds of things. And I think tech can help us, you know, fix those things.
Oprah Winfrey quoted, "Think like a queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is not a stepping stone to greatness." So Melanie, what have by far been your biggest achievement in your career?
I lived in London for 11 years, and for like 6 of those years, I ran a women's network, which was called LondonTechLadies. It's now called Rise. And we grew that to about 4,500 people. I think I ran like 55 events. They used to be every month, and it was soft skill training for women in tech, so that they got access to the skills that men were more naturally inclined to have gotten just in their upbringing, and negotiation skills, confidence, communication skills, those kinds of things. So that's like definitely one of my biggest achievements. I think also Google, getting a job at Google and then getting promoted to director at Google was a massive moment for me.
Impressive. What is the biggest factor that has helped you become successful? Any success habits?
I almost burned out about 2 years ago. I think a lot of people suffered during the pandemic. So what I'm going to say here is something that I've been working on throughout my career, but very recently I've gotten a lot better at, which is the ability to detach from work. Like, I honestly believe you can be better at work if you work less. And when you aren't working, you're actually resting and playing and doing whatever it is makes you feel good as a person. And then when you are at work, you'll be so much better. You'll be so much more efficient and amazing. Doing that ability to detach has helped me to do things like I can prioritize so much better. I can figure out what is satisfying and important for me to do. And I can do much better rigorous time management.
How do you then measure your own performance at work?
We have like a fairly structured performance process at Google. You literally get a rating and you get like peer feedback. Your manager gives like a summary of the work that you've done. So, we have that. But I think what I actually find satisfying as a person is, when we connect with our users and we see them using the thing that we have made and they talk about how it's changing their lives in some way. Like, that is just such a satisfying moment where you just see like all of the hard work, everything that we've been doing, like this is why we do it.
And what would you say is your biggest failure in your career, and what did you learn from it?
I would say I've burned out properly once before in another role, and then almost again recently about 2 years ago. And I see that as a failure because it's my responsibility to be true to myself. There will always be more work. There will always be more opportunity at work. And, I used to live in a way where I was so motivated by external validation. And I've really been reworking on that internally instead to make sure that I'm actually living for myself and that what I think about myself is the most important thing rather than what other people think about me. So I think allowing myself to get to a point where work was the most important thing in my life is definitely something. If I think about a failure, it's like something I wish I could go back and change, because, when I'm 80, I'm not going to be thinking about what I did at work, or I'm going to be thinking about the things I missed, right? Because I worked too much. How would I have changed it? Yeah, I think it's more the practices that I'm living to now, which is like really brutally prioritizing how I spend my time. And I very honestly believe that no job is worth sacrificing like your mental, physical health, and I'm prioritizing those things above everything else, and that is enabling me to just be much better at work as well. But yeah, I have to be pretty strict about like I have set working hours. I don't work outside of those hours. I actually have a manifesto that I've written and published at work, which I have shared with all of my team so they can hold me to account for like these rules.
What would you say then inspiring and motivating you the most in your role and career right now?
So the challenge that I'm working on within Google Search and working for creators is so inspiring, basically enabling people to have a voice, to surface people's voices and their authentic content. Like, it's really super inspiring for me. And I moved roles about 4 months ago, and yeah, I'm loving working in the search organization and all the new people that, I've been meeting. And yeah, it's just been super like exciting opportunity.
Let us now jump into the influence of mentorship and role models. Role models can consciously or subconsciously be a powerful force in our lives. In addition, mentors can guide us through our career journey and open the world of possibilities. Melanie, do you have a mentor today?
So it's interesting because my manager now, as of 4 months ago, who's the VP of UX for Search, Rhiannon Bell, was actually my sponsor and mentor for the last 3 years, and like was a big reason why I got my promotion. So I'm pretty lucky that that person is now also my manager. I have like this group of people, like senior UX leaders at Google, who I meet regularly, who I kind of see as like my network of people I use as my support mechanism, which is pretty awesome. The other thing that Google has has is they have a group called We Group, which is women empowerment, and it's all the executive level women who work in user experience at Google. There's about 76 of us, and we just had a summit where we all got together for 3 days, and that's an amazing community. So super inspiring to be a part of that group and have so many female senior, UX role models to look up to.
Beautiful. And who is the female role model you look up to in your field?
So another amazing female lead, other than Ree, who I just mentioned, is Suzanne Pelican. She was actually my manager in my early days at Google. She's the VP of UX for Google Ads. She's super inspiring. Also kind of been a sponsor for me throughout my career at Google so far.
How important do you think it is to have a role model or mentor during one's career? Because history shows that it has been common for more men to have it than women.
Oh, it's absolutely vital. It's not just mentoring. I think a sponsorship is vital. So the difference between a mentor and a sponsor is someone who will actually change things for you, who will help you find a new role. Like it's someone who has that ability, maybe a very senior person in your reporting line or, in a nearby area who can actually advocate for you at senior levels. Like that is so important. And that's what men get more of traditionally, because mentors, it's a little bit like coaching, but with a little bit more practical advice. But a sponsor will actually completely change your career because they will make opportunities for you. And that's, what we need more of for women.
Wow, interesting. Never heard of that before. That was new. Let's move on to leadership. Shirley Sandberg, CEO of Facebook, quoted, "Leadership is about making others as a result of your presence and making sure that the impact lasts in your absence." What does leadership mean to you?
Honestly, something I've done unintentionally throughout my career, but I've realized now is actually a big part of my leadership journey, is I almost work to make myself redundant over time in my roles, because I try to actually delegate a lot of what I do in my role to the people under me, right, and give them the ability to step up. And, I love taking breaks because I love to have people to have the space to jump in when normally, that thing or that moment would have been given to me. I just find that so satisfying. Like my number one value is lifting others up. There's always new roles and new opportunities. So it's not ever a case of me, delegating my role away and then having nothing to do. I love it. Love making myself redundant.
What do you consider a good leader versus a bad leader?
Big part of leadership, I think, is the environment that you create in the team. Is that environment inclusive? Like, can people be authentic, and do they have a good way for them to express their voice independent of the kind of person they are? Bad leadership I've seen is more, people who they're not actually listening. They're just listening to respond. They're not creating an environment where everyone has an opportunity to contribute. They might ask for questions in the last 2 minutes of a thing and then wait 30 seconds and say, okay, great, no questions, we'll just move on. But I spend a lot of time to build up trust and empathy in the team, to create psychological safety. So, everyone feels like it's a place that they can belong and they can actually be a part of the conversation.
Who is your favorite female tech leader and why?
I'm going to stick to my previous answer and say, I'm going to say Suzanne Pelican.
How would you describe yourself as a leader?
I think I am inclusive. I am a great manager because I get so much satisfaction out of developing other people. I'm pretty obsessed with the product, not in a micromanagement way, but I am really pushing the team to deliver something really exceptional. So very product detail and detail driven in terms of what we're actually going to ship to our users.
And as a leader, what values are most important to you?
I would say the ability to create psychological safety for the team, the ability to articulate a vision and then enable the team to understand the concrete steps to actually realize that, so that they know that thing can be achieved, and how we're going to measure our performance on the way to that end goal. The ability to remove roadblocks along that way. There's something that people really underestimate, which is the power of praise and recognition. Like me sending a small note or a message to someone to say thank you, that thing was great, is so influential and powerful, and we don't just give enough positive praise and realize the impact that has. So that's something I've been trying to be more conscious of recently.
What leadership lessons have you learned that have formed you into the leader you are today?
A pretty common one that a lot of designers go through when they move from being an individual contributor to being a manager is managing how you step away from the work and allow others, to do that, and how you give feedback and make sure the projects are going well without micromanaging. I think it's pretty easy to, especially in the beginning, it's much faster for you to just do the work yourself because you've gotten to a level of seniority and experience. And, I definitely went through that, when I was in my first formal management role at eBay, and, got to a point where I had someone in my team just saying Mel, you're absolutely micromanaging us, and we really need more space in this. And that was a real wake up moment for me, that my drive for quality was having a negative impact on people. So I've really been so conscious of that since then, and just trying to find ways to make sure the work is going well. And the way that I do that now is by asking questions. Try to very rarely say what someone should be doing, and instead I just ask them questions about the work that they're doing, and the way I frame those questions usually implies the feedback that I have.
So connected to that, what would you say are your 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses?
Oh, okay. 3 strengths. I get stuff done. I'm super motivated by ticking things off the list. So execution, I love to architect a vision. So I love taking something that might be seen broken, and then imagining what that thing can look like, so the before and after. Yeah, I'm very good at making other people enjoy their experience, working on projects and making sure that they find working on the team meaningful. Then my 3 weaknesses, I'm so hard on myself. I think this is pretty common with women. I'm my own biggest critic. I actually have a photo on my desk of me as a child to when I'm being super tough on myself, to actually be hey, you're being hard on young Mel here. This is not good. What's the other thing? My other weakness is my default is to take on too much myself. So I have to be very conscious of that. Yeah, my other weakness is I have a whole lifetime of programming that I'm undoing right now, which is where what I used to care about most was what other people thought about me. And, I was chasing my promotion. I was chasing all these external validation points because that's what I deemed to be my worth. And that drove my behavior a lot, actually. And so that's a weakness that I am consciously managing.
Let us now jump into the hottest topic in business today, workplace culture, unlocking the power of diversity, equality, and inclusion. What do diversity, equality, and inclusion mean to you personally?
Diversity is the representation of the people who you have in your organization, and making sure that you do have a diverse representation. And that's not just race or gender, there's so many aspects to that. Inclusion to me is that then all of those people feel like they have access to the same things and, feel safe to kind of contribute their opinion. But equality is actually the most important thing here, because there's this assumption that, everyone should have the same access as the right solution. Equality is where you actually look at what you're providing to each person. You make sure that, considering their circumstances, they have the same ability to contribute, which might mean that they get a slightly different framework that they have to operate within to other people, so that they can contribute in the same way. I think a good way to think about that is maybe someone who is in a wheelchair. If we give them exactly the same thing as someone who can walk, they're not going to be able to participate in the same way. We have to make some extra considerations so that they actually receive equality, and access to things in the same way a person who can walk can.
What would you consider being 3 to 5 signs of good company culture if you were to join a company?
Yes, and this is something you can look for when you're interviewing, basically, and you should have these kind of key questions that I would be asking a company. So I would ask, what is the personal development process at this company? How do people progress? Is this a clear way? How do people get feedback? Is there a good, healthy mechanism for that to happen so that people feel like they have access to new opportunities? The other would be that retention is good, that people are happy and satisfied with their manager and the leadership that they're staying within. I think you can see pretty clearly, if there's high turnover, that people leave bad managers, right? And they leave bad leadership. So that's pretty good indicator of the culture of the team. Another would be how meetings are. You can tell in a meeting, do you ever hear a dissenting opinion? Do you ever hear someone speak up and ask a pretty open or maybe slightly challenging question? Do people speak up? Is there a way for them to do that? I know it depends on the forum, but that gives you a pretty good indicator of the culture. If people feel psychological safety, they're much more likely to do those things.
So as a woman, what has been the most significant barrier in your career, and how have you overcome these challenges?
I still experienced as a woman, the messaging that society tells you, right? That your value is in your appearance. Everyone has to like you. And I still had that, even though I was raised around men and I had some strong female role models. So I definitely still had to overcome my requirement to be liked. And it's really hard for women, to be told, don't challenge, don't be seen as being, super critical or aggressive, because then you're just bossy and aggressive, and make sure everyone likes you and that you're bringing everyone together. And, that's kind of your role. In my last few years in my career, I've kind of gotten to this point where I'm okay with the fact that not everyone's going to like me. And that's really liberating, because that's deep reprogramming my brain from that perspective. That allows me to be more myself and dissent and to say things that I'm uncomfortable with, because I don't mind if, there's going to be people who don't like what I'm saying or doing, which I think men are much more comfortable to do. So that's been a pretty big thing for me. The other is I've had so much of time in my career where I've been the only woman in the room, and I've usually been so much younger than everyone else because I progressed pretty quickly and I went straight into the workforce. That's been so hard to be the only one who looks like me. I've had to go and find, my peers outside of my direct teams. And that's why I started the Women's Network, when I was in London. And then I, was surrounding myself in the environments to make sure that I had that, even though I didn't necessarily have that at work all the time.
Then why do you think it's important for more women to join the tech industry, especially as leaders?
This is amazing. Women hold 75% of the buying power. Women are so influential to the economy that the fact that companies have still not realized this, the ability that they have to actually make more money by having more women in senior positions, is crazy to me. It is just mind-boggling. So in tech especially, it's definitely more important for women to join. I think actually we now are seeing higher rates of women in education than men, and we need to capitalize on this talent. We need to make sure that women see themselves in the leadership and then can progress, through into different levels within the technology industry. Not just women, it's just all angles of diversity. We will make better products in technology if we have better representation, because we'll be much more likely to consider all different aspects of how culture and society will, interact with this product.
I agree with you, but as you also said, there's a lot of challenges getting there. So how do you speak with your female and male colleagues about these challenges, especially, salary gap, company culture, etc.?
Yeah, we have quite a few active discussions. I think Google is pretty good about promoting and giving space for people internally run their own groups and committees focused on how we're improving our DE&I for our team, and we do a lot of kind of representation to the broader team about what it's like to be from an underrepresented group and what your experience is actually like, to build more advocacy and empathy across the group. The other aspect of this, which is important that we focus on, is not just how our team is set up and who we have in our team, but who we're actually designing for in our products. And how do we make sure that the products we make are inclusive, so that when people are interacting with Google products, they actually can have a fair and equal experience. And that is something that the tech industry is still coming to terms with at the moment. Yeah, I guess it's just about building that advocacy, sharing the stories, and then working pretty intentionally on improving, our representation as well.
Yeah, and there are many public and internal discussions overall going on right now about the barriers women face from reaching higher positions, especially in the tech industry. How do you feel is affecting you, and what is your advice how to best unlock these roadblocks?
One of my roles, I loved the team, I loved what I was doing, and that I had a male manager and they left, and then we had a skip level manager, was a man, and they were all amazing. And then I actually had a woman join. They became my manager, and I don't know, it was just one of those women who see other women as competition rather than, take the role of kind of lifting them up, and actually end up leaving that role pretty quickly after that. And that's something it's really sad to me that there are so few spots for women society has conditioned us to see each other as competition rather than giving us enough space so that, we can see the benefits of having, more of us in the room. Because if there's only one chair for a woman, and we're all fighting for it, it's just so unfortunate. So that was, a pretty hard moment for me, because I've actually had just amazing and supportive women in my life before that experience. And leaving was my best option at that point. And unfortunately, I've mentored a lot of women, and they've described like the environment that they're within. And I've had this, realization moment with them where it's like, you do not have the ability to change that culture, right? What you can do, unfortunately, is find a culture that will be more inclusive for you, where you will have, equal opportunity and the ability to progress. And unfortunately, a lot of companies are still terrible at diversity and inclusion. So women have to be super intentional about, where they apply. And not everyone has that privilege, which is the truth, that they can't just quit and move on. But that is the strongest thing that we have. We have spending power, and we have our decision making over like where we actually work.
Yeah, and so many tech companies are working on marketing campaigns, attracting women, but I would say that the challenges they have is not attracting because women want to go in, is actually retaining them. So what is your best advice on strategies where companies can work to build a stronger corporate culture that engages diversity?
Yep. So specifically for women. So it actually answers attraction and retain. Do you have women in your leadership team? Do you actually have role modeling and women who can help other women progress up the chain? What we spoke about earlier around sponsorship is like, do you have people who will advocate and move things around and create opportunity for other women? And usually that is women who will do that for other women. So making sure that we have enough of that representation at the senior levels, and that actually attracts more talent as well. Like I've done a little bit of consulting for some external companies, and someone was saying to me like, hey, we really want to hire a woman, but we're not getting any applications, so there just aren't any. I was like, no, that's not true. And I was like, here's your webpage, and here are all the white men in your executive team, and there are no women. So I'm sure that women are not applying because they don't see themselves in your leadership team. Yeah, the other thing in terms of retention is we have to recognize the fact that women have grown up in a completely different environment from men. They have so many different barriers to how they can succeed. So we can't just give them exactly the same that men have. Like we actually have to provide a lot more to support them. We have to push them much harder to promote themselves, to even apply for promotions, because they're just not naturally going to do those things. So they have to have, more mentorship and sponsorship from people who will advocate for them and push them and encourage them to do those things, because it's just not the natural inclination necessarily.
So what would you say are the few challenges and possibilities of implementing diversity, equality, inclusion culture in a workplace today? Why is it so challenging?
You still have companies who are thinking about it because they know it's how they get good employees in the company. They aren't actually thinking about it because they want their company to change. And that's like fundamentally going to fail. So honestly, the way that DE&I improves is by having leadership who believe in it, because you have to change so many things at so many levels in the company to make sure that you can actually attract and retain and progress people through all different levels who, come from a diverse representation of backgrounds. What I'm seeing in a lot of companies, at the moment, the bottom level, people believe in it and they want to improve it. But if they don't have a leadership team and, the ultimate leader who actually believes in it and who will make changes, then it's doomed to fail.
And one of these companies, what would you say to their CEOs about the benefits from having workplace gender diversity, especially better gender representation at C-level?
Yeah, like, do you want to make more money? I mean, that's motivating, right? Do you want to build products and ship products that meet the needs of more of society? Do you want to better meet the needs of women who are, I think it's predicted to be almost 80% of the spending power within the household in the US in the next few years. Like, if you want to do that, you need to have those people representing in your organization. And unfortunately, money is the motivator here. So the most influential narrative I've seen around this is the business case that people build to say why doing this is good for the business.
How much do you think the industry has changed regarding this subject since you joined?
Oh my gosh, so much. Like, barely was even talked about, when I was starting out. There weren't even names for the things that I was experiencing. I just knew that it was hard to be a woman. There is a narrative around it now. There's much more conscious understanding about it, and there's a lot more experience in the industry to make meaningful change. We still have so far to go, but there is very motivating amount of, I think, like quite serious intention to actually improve this, because it's linked to the revenue of the business now. Like, I think that's so clear. So you have a lot of people taking it very seriously.
So based on what you said, looking back on your career, what one thing would you have changed in your working environment to break the bias?
To have people who, which is generally cisgender white men, but those who are represented at the majority, to have had a easier mechanism for them to experience, even just for a singular moment, what it's like to actually be excluded, right, in these environments. Because that empathy, that will change behavior, that will change everything. I see this with allies. They're like, I want to help, but because they haven't experienced it themselves, it's just so hard to make meaningful change.
And you've already explained all the amazing work you do in this area, but even going further as a leader, what will you do to improve the bias for the next generation of women in tech?
So role modeling, so important. I still think we have a way to go with girls, basically, in school. Like, how do we make science cool? How do we make maths cool? Like, those are still stigmatized as male-based subjects. And I think in some societies, especially in more privileged areas, there's been a lot of intentional work with schools to, make those subjects more appealing for women and to improve the representation. Because honestly, girls will look up, well, I only see men working in that, so like, why would I want to do that? So I think that's something that would really improve it, as well as thinking about how we message this through all the other subliminal messaging that children receive, whether it's the writing on their clothes, the representation in their stories. Like, these things make a massive difference. I think we've been focusing much later on in the journey, which is like, how do we get people at higher levels of education into tech? It's like, how do we actually make them think about tech when they're kids? I think that's where we're really going to make a big change.
Let us now move on to another hot topic in business, which is workplace balance and mental health. You have without a doubt a busy lifestyle, and you also shared with us that you experienced burnouts. How do you take care of yourself to maintain a good mental health today?
Yes, today is very different to if you'd asked me this 2 years ago. I have my wellness manifesto, and in that I have my values very clearly stated. I have a very clear articulation over how I want to be working, like what my role should be. Then I have some kind of principles around how I live with balance, like what am I doing from a wellness perspective. I basically have articulated, like, work should never stop me from doing the activities that I need to do to be a happy and healthy human being. And so for me, that means 3 workouts a week, taking an hour lunch break so I can actually eat a healthy meal and have a short walk, that I can have a few days working from home where I can be more flexible. Like, these things make such a big difference to me. But also detaching from work, around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so that I can then have the rest of the day to just, live my life, so that I get a good sleep. Like, honestly, sleep is a really big thing for me in enabling this. I mean, this all sounds amazing, but unfortunately, a lot of people have to hit the bottom to actually realize all of these things. And when you say it, it's just like, of course eating well makes you feel good, of course sleeping makes you feel good, but we sacrifice those things for work so much. And the reality is, I'm not a heart surgeon. No one's gonna die if I don't do my job, right? But I might die if I do my job too hard.
Well said. What is one thing that motivates you every day to get out of bed?
My husband. I have an amazing partner, Max. He is so supportive, and we've built such an amazing life together, and we're true equal partners. He just brings me so much joy. I wake up, I see him in bed every day, and makes me smile, and I love living my life with him.
What is then your advice on how companies can create a more mentally healthy workplace in the new now?
I think we have to talk about this. We have to accept the fact that people are so overwhelmed and they're burning out at a systemic rate. To be really conscious over the fact that this is happening and be intentional about how we allocate work, how we understand people's capacity. I'm rolling out an initiative I started a couple of years ago, coinciding with my own burnout, which is a thing called a well-being plan, where basically we train managers on how to facilitate, a really structured and helpful conversation conversation with all of their reports about defining what their own well-being means for them and the things that they have to do to maintain that well-being and what's stopping them from doing that today, and basically setting an action plan, which, the manager can work with them over time to kind of improve that, and just making conversations about well-being regular and intentional.
Now, let us wrap up with a few words of wisdom and a piece of advice for our listeners. Melanie, what is the best piece of advice you've been given that has helped you during setbacks in your role and career?
Flip your internal monologue upside down. So what do I mean by that? When you are hearing that voice inside your head, which is usually so negative and mean, what I was told once is to instead imagine you're talking to your friend and just notice how different you are and how much more kind you are. And that's so powerful. So sometimes when I'm feeling a little bit kind of worried about a situation or getting stressed about something, I talk to myself in the way I would talk to my friend. And basically, you can feel how great it feels to be supported. And then we can do that to ourselves, which is just so powerful.
And then what is the worst advice you have ever been given, and how did you tackle that one?
That I don't have any self-esteem, and the best thing that I could do is listen to more Oprah Winfrey podcasts. And I heard that from a leader. What did I do to tackle this? That was a long conversation. Well, that was just the tip of what was said, was realizing that not everyone's opinions are important, and that some things that are said to you should be ignored. What women tend to do is something happens to them and they ruminate and overthink that thing beyond the point of learning that is valuable. And so sometimes something should happen and you should just be like, okay, that happened, and you should move on.
Is there something you wish you would have known, or a skill you wish you had when starting out in the tech industry?
I don't know. I'm a real believer in the things that have happened to you have brought you where you are. So I wouldn't go back and change anything. If I was going to go back, I would probably just say to myself, this is going to be hard. There are going to be challenges, right? This is the reality, but you have the resilience. You will rise to all of these challenges, and after each challenge, you're actually going to be better. And it won't feel that way in the moment, but strength comes through these periods of, discomfort. That's where you grow in those moments. So maybe just an understanding that it would be hard, but that's okay. That's expected.
And what advice would you give to young girls and women wanting and trying to break into the STEM fields today?
The best thing that you can do is find a place or a person or a situation where you feel like your future or your progression is going to be well supported. And what do I mean by that? Is there role modeling of people who look like you there? Are there going to be people where you feel like you'll be able to be sponsored or mentored? Is it an environment where your best intentions are going to be represented? That is a place to focus. And you might not find that where you are, and if you don't, then there's so many opportunities, networks that you can join, or people that you can find. Sheryl Sandberg started the Lean In Circle group, which was actually how my network started originally. It was just 5 of us women getting together and supporting each other, and that was the most powerful thing that happened in the early days of my career.
Last but not least, what is next for you in your role and career in tech? What are your career aspirations?
So I'm pretty new in Google search, so I'm pretty excited about what the next few years will look like and the things that I'm working on here internally. I just got promoted to director last year, so I'm pretty happy taking a break from thinking about any progression, and I'm pretty happy with where I am. And it's kind of a moment for me where I'm actually prioritizing just happiness in my life above career progression, and I actually feel like career progression will come because I am, making sure that I'm prioritizing being healthy and being happy. So that's my main focus right now.
Melanie, thank you so much for being a guest on the Queens of Tech podcast. Sharing your journey will without a doubt inspire, change, and reshape company culture for the new generation of women in tech.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you have worked in the tech industry minimum 3 years and would like to share your journey, please nominate yourself or somebody you know to i@jasminemoradi.com. For more podcast episodes and to learn more about the Queens of Tech initiative and to support us, visit queensof.tech.